But anyway, today we're actually going to be talking about a pretty fun topic. It's a topic that I actually requested a lot in the Discord. One of the biggest things that I guess people really want to know is movement. Because I feel like no matter how many times I go over it, it's never really enough. You know what I mean? Like, people always want to know more about it. And you know what? Maybe going back over and over again is pretty cool, I guess. You know, it's a pretty good idea. But, you know, it's a pretty good idea to do that. But you know what? It happens. And I think in going over it, I think we can probably learn some more advanced stuff. And even in my own personal training, I always tend to kind of enjoy going back to basics, like, you know, even not necessarily in fighters, but I'll just sit here and like play guitar and whatnot, and I would just sometimes go back to like songs that I haven't played in like a decade. I'd be like, oh, this is cool. Or I'll review scales and be like, okay, how can I do that? Can I make it more interesting? So you never know. I'm not in the WTG Discord, but yes, I do want to learn movement. Neutral is one of the worst aspects of my gameplay. Well, you're in the right place, Kenpai. Thank you for joining us. And if you're not in the Discord, don't sweat it. But if you change your mind, you can subscribe. That's the easiest way to get to it. I'm an awful and neutral. I wouldn't say you're awful. I wouldn't say you're awful, just not playing at the highest level that you could. Let's say that. Man, I don't even remember. Okay, I'm gonna... Full disclosure, because I know this is gonna be a VOD, and people are gonna complain, oh, it's too long. Why don't you edit this? But I'm going to be 100% real with you guys. I have not touched this game in about 2.5 weeks. It has been a minute since I actually, like, intentionally booted up this game. And we're in for a little bit of a struggle. Like, it's been long enough that holding the stick, pause, feels weird. And yeah, it doesn't feel particularly good, so I have to kind of get my muscle memory back. I don't even know if I could do combos, like, so if I take a minute to warm up, please let me know. But like, I'm curious, if you're in the chat, if you're new and you haven't, you know, said anything, I would love to hear from you. What are things about neutral that you guys, actually everyone in the chat, what are things about neutral that you guys find difficult, that you feel like you're not getting? What's frustrating you? Tell me some issues that you guys have, you know, that you're self-diagnosing. Okay. Yeah, I'm going for a rejump like first. Yeah, no, I forgot how to delay. Ooh, almost. Hi, I'm new here. Found you guys on YouTube. I'm so happy, and I'm glad that you found us on YouTube, because we will be updating our YouTube a lot this year. We're going to be moving mostly to YouTube. We're not going to stop streaming, but a lot of stuff is going to... Yo, thank you for the resub. But a lot of stuff is going on YouTube now, and we're going to be holding more classes in general, and, you know... Whew, got it. And we're going to be hosting more stuff as well, you know, on YouTube, and we're going to be making more videos, more VODs. We're going to see if we can get some stuff down. We'll go over that towards the end. But, yeah, so I still want to hear from you guys. What are you guys struggling with in neutral? What about neutral is confusing you guys? Riza with his zoning, I can't match up. Okay, I can't move. I can help you with that. We'll stick around. I'll get there. For me, I found that I've had a hard time about right angles for jumping in against opponents who would also jump in. I'm also pretty decent with my team. On ground, I'm pretty decent with my team. Kefla, Super Broly, Janemba. Okay, that's not a bad team. You know, I've seen worse. That's a pretty well-built team. You know, so that's good. You know, but... Ooh. But, yeah. I've seen worse. Yeah, your team is unironically probably worse than that one. No offense, Funny. No offense. Could I do a normal rejump? Yes. Oh my god, the game feels alien to me now. Thank you guys for being patient with me while I try to warm up and practice a little bit. Because I'm not joking when I say this is the first time I've actually touched this game in a minute. Okay. Let's see. I'm not strong enough to know my flaws, but what I can tell you is it isn't good enough. Ooh. Well, what makes you say it's not good enough? I'm curious. Like, where are you noticing the biggest deficiency in your play? Like, where would you say is the biggest deficiency for how you want to play? Do I go for it? Yes. Ah! I hate that link. It's so weird. Yeah, so I'm not feeling super consistent. Anyway, I should probably practice my movement. So, let's see. Ooh. Ooh. Ooh, we're very rusty. Oh, we're very rusty. Ooh. Okay. Anyway. So, regardless. I think we have enough data to go ahead. We're going to begin with some very, very, very common mistakes. Anyway, so the big common mistakes that I often see are not really that... I wouldn't say they're necessarily as, like, pervasive. Oh, hang on. I'm struggling to understand the value of dash blocking. If you end up blocking, then haven't you lost neutral and are now on defense? Why move close to the opponent instead of without the intention of attacking? So dash blocking is pretty good for a couple of reasons. I'll go over that in a section. So we're going to go by sections. So we're going to have common mistakes first. I'm going to explain some zones. We're going to talk about the phases of the game. We're going to talk about introduction to positioning, identifying pokes with your characters, basic movement patterns to get you guys started, and the last one is the most important one, which is an introduction to a concept called Maai. We're going to go over that concept in detail, but I'm going to go through it. So if you guys have any questions at any point, I'll get to them when I can. There may be some questions that I'm going to tell you to put a pin on it. That means that we're going to go back to that means that I'm going to cover it in a specific section. So that's very, very important. Anyway, very, very important. So what are some common mistakes that I see? Very, very common mistake. You don't super jump. Super jumping is very, very important. So you guys dash jump a lot. You guys IAD a lot. Super dash a lot without ever really floating, which is a pretty big issue. And it ties in to the second most, probably the second biggest mistake, which is spending your double jump unnecessarily. Like this. Like, basically the double jump is a resource. And one of the reasons why jumping is not good enough is because jumping is what we use in WTG. It's a word that we use a lot if you guys are subscribed. If you guys are OGs, you hear me use this a lot. It's very, very inflexible. So right here, if I hold forward, I can hold back, right? Like, I'm blocking here. But, damn. It's so hilarious. I can't even jump. I'm fighting the muscle memory to super jump. Like, I'm fighting the muscle memory. That's how important super jumping is as a basic form of movement. So, jumping is cool. I am blocking here, but the problem with jumping is that I only control the amount of space here. But if I dash jump, or if I dash jump, I still control the same. So I basically, with dash momentum, I can cover all the way to my opponent on the other end of the screen. But if I super jump, I can float back. I can fast fall. I can float air dash, which basically allows me to bait things, allows me control. I don't land in a predictable place. And it lets me basically get in with my opponent if I moon jump, right? Oops. If I moon jump, I can stop my momentum and still hit them where I need to hit them, or I can just go completely over them. You see, like, right there, you guys saw me halt in midair after, like, a big jump where I was like, whee, you know? And then, where I'm like, whee, oh, hang on, and then I started floating back immediately without spending my double jump. Basically, if you super jump, you have way more control over what we call micro positions, or basically positions where opponents are like about right here, and you want to be able to make them whiff. So tiny positions where your opponent looks like they might be able to hit you but can't. These are very, very important. It's a little bit advanced, but you could build the habit now. If you're not super jumping, make sure you take it into the lab and practice. Get your super jumping down. It's even easier than ever before because now you have the S macro. As you can see on my controls, I'm literally just holding S. I'm not inputting anything complicated, and I get the full... And I gotta make the full, you know, I don't have to do the full movement. I can still, you know, float. You know, I can still float. I can still fast fall. So that's pretty cool. If you guys want to know how to do that without firing your key blast, what I would recommend doing is ID JM, and then within, or ID button. Doesn't matter if you want to do JM, JL, doesn't really matter. JH, whatever floats your boat. But in the animation of that, hold S, because it doesn't Gatling, right? But you are registered as holding the input. And now, you can do that. And if you dash jump normally, now you have a moon jump. They've made it easier than ever to do this. Even Arxis recognized how important super jumping is. You guys need to get it down to the point where it becomes your default method of jumping. Now, it also covers the second thing, spending your double jump unnecessarily. So, if I'm right here, right, I don't need to spend my double jump. Let's pretend that Blue Q's a real opponent. Blue Q's probably going to 2M here. Right? So if I do this, that 2M is now guaranteed because he has no reason not to 2M. Now, I could, you know, JS, but if he has an assist that goes through it, if he decides to dash block and call an assist, if he decides to OS, if he decides to shoulder, he'll go right through it. This is way too easy because if you double jump, you have no other air options afterwards. Now, if you super jump and spend your double jump, you can still float, right? You can still float, and you can still fast fall. However, you have to land now. It's not ambiguous. Meanwhile, if I do something like this, and he approaches me, right? So let's say, maybe I can get a recording going to demonstrate. So let's see. You see, right there, I can control what I'm doing. But if I spend my double jump, you know, he could just wait for me to land and then 2M me, and there's really nothing I can do about it. And it's ambiguous whether or not he's going to do it. If I decide that I want to try to land for a button, he can 2H me. He could super dash me. He could, if he has Gohan, he can just super dash me, call Gohan, and then 50-50, depending on the character. This is a big problem. Do not spend your double jump. Your double jump is the single most important resource in neutral. Spend it wisely. We will cover when to spend it in the basic movement patterns, but basically, pay attention to how much you double jump, treat it like a resource, and always be super jumping. Very, very, very important. So those are the two most common mistakes. Now, the third most common mistake that I see, and press, you know, I want to see some ones in the chat if you guys experience this. People who just don't stop pressing buttons in neutral. They're always like, you know, pressing their big buttons. If it's a Vegito, they're always pressing 5M. If it's like a Gogeta Blue, they're always like auto comboing. You know, they're always doing something like they just can't do something. They're always like pressing, you know, key blasts. Press 1 if you just know people that are just hyper aggressive that don't stop for like 10 seconds. Where you're like, can we just have a moment, please? You know, can we just do our thing? Can we just play the game like normal human beings, please? You know, it happens. So, if that's the case, right? How do we deal with these people? Because, you know, they're very frustrating. Part of the game and part of high-level strategy, and we will cover this in much later detail down the line, but basically, the TLDR is that high-level strategy revolves it being very ambiguous whether or not you're going to attack. Because that ambiguity is very, very important. We call it creating a threat, which is basically like you could attack but might not. This is very, very important because you can basically force your opponent into a situation where they overcompensate for the threat and then do something that leads to them getting killed, where if you actually acted on the threat, it probably wouldn't have done a lot of damage. So, very important to keep in mind. Being aggressive in this game is good until you know how to control it. When you fight somebody that knows how to control it with fantastic movement, being aggressive is basically a free opening. Because if Kefla is just always going to Ki Blast, and if I notice that she's always going to Ki Blast if I'm on the ground, I could just literally spend my double jump and then super dash, and she's fucked. I shouldn't be cursing on YouTube. Sorry. But yeah, she can't do anything about it, which is a big problem, right? And, you know, kind of sucks. And obviously, if you get more advanced, and you guys attend the part 2 where we start talking about tempo and whatnot, once you guys get there, you begin realizing that there are a lot of ways you can kill them very, very easily for doing this. Could you do a VOD about labbing, making an example of the bot pressure so you can build up muscle memory to block easier? Yes. Better than a VOD, actually. I'm going to make sure that is a new short. Star gets home from the holiday, so definitely keep an eye out for that. We're going to try to have that up by next week. But if you guys are interested, make sure to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. On YouTube, we're going to be posting a short. We're going to do one on how to use the lab properly and some bad habits in using the lab and how you can basically maximize your lab time. So don't worry, that's coming. Anyway, but yeah, so, you know, you don't want to be overly aggressive. So you might be wondering, if I don't want to be overly aggressive, when am I supposed to attack? We'll cover that in more detail in identifying pokes, but basically, you should probably hit if you know your opponent's either going to respond to it, or if your opponent can't do anything about it. We'll go over that in a little bit. Yep, I'm definitely going to need a VOD. I forgot about commercials. Yeah. I don't know if they actually really help. I'm gonna run a poll. Ooh. Interesting. Anyway. But yeah. Anyway. So, these are the 3 most basic issues. Another thing would be super dashing a lot. Super dash is a very, very powerful tool, but using super dash correctly is a very important skill to master. Generally, super dash is in the game, and you can't really remove it because it's a very powerful mechanic against people that are constantly doing this. So if they're constantly jumping away, super dash is a very powerful way to capitalize on their movement. So if I do this, you know, I can capitalize on it if I super dash and I call that into high enough assist, or if they're low enough to the ground, I can actually jail them down to a mix and basically punish them for jumping too much. Now they can obviously jab it, but that is a very, very hard reaction. But it's a neat interaction that exists within neutral, and you will see this play out a lot in high level neutral. So super dash is quite important. It's also very good as a way for checking zoning if it's a bit too close, and it's also a very powerful mix-up versus cross-up. Oop, not like that. Like this catches everyone, including Yasha. I have caught Yasha with same side super dash. You can do this. Yeah, exactly. So make sure you're using your tools appropriately and try to commit as little as possible. Now, one of the reasons why super dash is really, really silly, and you can use this to call out people if you're on a ranked sesh or if you're playing casuals and you notice the person that you're playing against is constantly spamming super dash and they're not paying attention to your bar. Super dash is a free level 3. Unless you're Kefla and you call it out too late, then maybe not. But most characters, especially if you're playing a character with a beam, yeah, that super dash is toast. So definitely keep that in mind. But those are the most common mistakes that I see. With that out of the way, you guys, if you want to stop the video here and you guys take nothing away from this, but you do suffer from these habits, all I have to say is this. Stop spending your double jump. Make super jumping your default method of jumping and learning how to mood jump. And learn to be more patient and precise with your pokes when you actually want to attack an opponent. If you guys can get the hang of that, even if you don't use this video, I guarantee you're going to improve significantly. Like, you're going to notice a big difference in your gameplay and your results. Would you be winning probably the people that would you be winning against the people that, you know, finish these classes and, you know, are part of the WTG community, or at the very least are learning and studying Dragon Ball at a decently high level? Probably not, but will you be able to dominate ranked? Guaranteed. Guaranteed. But that's going to basically cover all of this, and now we're going to go into basically neutral proper. Now this is going to be fun. This is where things get really, really fun for me. So, what are we going to basically discuss? The first thing on our list, the first thing that we need to recap, because I realize that you guys may not have an idea of how this really interacts, is zone. You might be wondering, okay, I know what a zone is, I've heard you say it, I have a basic idea of it, but WTF is a zone. If you're one of those people, congratulations, this is the stream for you. Zones is a coin that's actually coined by Doc in a fantastic video he did breaking down high level neutral back in season 2. And I don't remember, I'll make sure that Star includes his videos in the description, and you guys can probably find it if you're part of the DBFZ network at all on Discord. You'll probably find it in the resources section. It is that valuable. But zones are basically ways to divide the screen that help us understand and measure our options for engagement. So basically, this is going to be zone 1. Now here, everything we have is an option to engage. A jab is usually our shortest reaching button. It will always connect here. Even if it's a stubby jab, zone 1 is about from here, from this distance right here. This is your zone 1. This is very, very important. Now, what do we do if we're in neutral and we end up in zone 1? The correct answer may surprise you. It's block. If you are in zone 1 without the intention to attack, it is incredibly dangerous for you to take a turn. Now, obviously, if you have a measured degree of risk and you basically understand the risks that you're undertaking and you want to try, go for it. But all it takes for your opponent to screw you over is literally that. Literally that. If you try to take your turn, you're done. Be very, 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 very careful when it comes to zone 1. And generally speaking, you want to try to avoid being in zone 1 unless you are the one that won neutral, or unless you enter it on your terms, or unless you surrendered neutral. Try to avoid this. You don't want to try to make being here your goal. Now, one backdash space here. This is zone 2. As you might notice, this is round start distance. Match start distance is about right here. Round start distance is about right here. This is where a majority of neutral will take place. I personally like to call this the engagement distance, because this is essentially when, all right, I'm in neutral, we're going to wrestle, we're going to tussle it out, I'm going to respond to your pokes, I'm going to attack with pokes of my own, we're going to exchange assists if we need to, and one of us is going to win neutral. This is very, very, very important. A majority of neutral is played here. You want to prioritize, and basically a majority of neutral, or early neutral, is figuring out how to get here and navigate being here safely without getting hit, and converting that into actual damage. If you guys can do that, congratulations, you have solved neutral. Zone 2 is the single most important one to control. One more backdash distance away, we're at zone 3. Now, this right here is what we would call full screen. This is where a majority of my pokes will whiff, but if I'm a character like, for example, Kefla, I can control this pretty well. I can control the angle as well as Kefla here. You know, I can't exactly attack you with any buttons, but if I dash, I can theoretically make that go full screen. You know? So I can make that go full screen. This is very, very, very important now, because basically, this is your safe zone. Very few characters have what we would call potent threats here. So what exactly is a potent threat? Well, let's say that I start zoning Blue Goku. This will be more relevant when we get into the introduction to positioning. But ask yourself, what am I accomplishing here? I'm gaining meter, but so is he. He's not taking any chip damage. He's locked down, but what if he has more health than me? He's not really doing anything. And he's controlling. So if I try to, dash in, he actually might be able to control the interaction from here because it'll take me too much time to close the distance because he has to wait until I have to wait until I'm done firing Ki Blasts. This is very, very, very important. And I believe somebody asked me what dash blocking is for. It's for situations like this to take space, essentially. Dash blocking is very powerful here. And I'll explain why later. But these are the zones. Now, you might be wondering, well, why would I ever want to go to Zone 3? Zone 3 is your safe zone. Because of the exact reason that I just mentioned about, characters having not a lot of range or, not having very valuable threats in that position, not having very valuable threats in that position, you can control Zone 2. So right here, if I'm here, I'm like, okay, I want to relax. This is my safe zone. And now, if I'm Adult Gohan, you might be wondering, what does Adult Gohan do? Because he can't really attack unless he jumps. That is true. But his Ki Blast does pull him back. And more importantly, notice the zone, his 2S, attacks. 2S and JS both attack Zone 2. Which means that, theoretically, in a position, because I know that Blue Goku wants to enter Zone 2, I can make it unsafe for him to do so. So, let's say Blue Goku wants to... let me try that again. Ooh, no, we don't want to do that. So let's say Blue Goku wants to come in. I just went neutral. Because I'm controlling this zone, I can now stop him from coming in. And take my turn. Now, obviously, is that going to happen all the time? Believe it or not, yeah, actually. This is going to happen pretty often. This is one of the reasons why a lot of the strategy that we're going to talk about, a lot of the positioning when we get into the nitty-gritty in future parts and installments of this, and in future masterclasses where I actually choose to advance and start talking about more high-level and advanced stuff, this is essentially a majority of what neutral interactions and decision-making is going to be a part of, is how to get into that zone safely, without losing your turn, and without blocking. Now, you might be wondering, wait a minute, though, but that's a Ki Blast. Goku could reflect Kefla. That is true. I could also DR. And now you're in the corner. I have good Oki, and now you have to hold Adult Gohan pressure. So even though it is potentially a good way to get out, it can be killed. So be careful with that. It's not an easy out. There are very, very rarely do there exist situations that cannot easily be countered. Thank you so much for the resub. I appreciate it, Cloud. Glad to see you on the tier 2 sub. Tier 2s do get trading with me, so we'll make sure to lock down some dates now that I'm back. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Anyway, so controlling Zone 2 from Zone 3, pretty powerful. You don't need to be able to hit full screen. As long as you can control Zone 2, that's important. Now you might be wondering, okay, well then how is Adult Gohan supposed to play neutral when he wants to get close? Well, that's pretty much the entirety of these classes. Ideally, by the end of your time with WTG, you should be fearless playing Adult Gohan in level 0 in neutral against pretty much anybody. And I mean pretty much anybody. That's my goal. If you can win neutral with this guy, characters like this guy, you're chilling. And that's kind of the goal. Now, let me be clear. My goal is not for you guys to play Adult Gohan. My goal is to illustrate that you guys don't need full screen options and like 1,000 things under the sun in order to play neutral. You can play a very clean, very simple game utilizing maybe 25% of your toolkit half the time. Just so I can understand, I can know what questions to ask yet. What subscription are we on with the review? Oh, subsection. We are in the zone part. I am discussing zones. I am going to go through phases of the game, introduction to positioning, identifying pokes, basic movement patterns, and introduction to Maai. Now, pretty cool, right? Is everyone following me so far? I want to make sure my chat's, you know, feeling comfortable. What do you guys think? What do you guys think of this? Is this helping? Oof. That's actually kind of mean. Ooh, that's very mean. Yes, sir. This is helping me thus far. Very nice. I'm glad to hear it. All right. Are we comfortable moving on yet? Do you guys have any questions that you want to ask before we move on to the next section? I am being a good streamer today and intaking my H2O. Oops. So, just a quick rundown. How do I move into the next zone properly? That's going to be covered in the later section. Don't worry, I will answer your question in a bit. I would put a pin on that. Any other questions before we move on? Last call, last call. Oh, that's kind of nasty, actually. Ooh. Let's see, because I want to make that scary, right? Yeah, it's going to be tricky to make scary. I have to figure that out. Because it's, you know, not exactly the same as with... Oh god, he's labbing mix again. This is my first time playing in a very long time. I'm giving you guys time to ask questions, but we're going to move on before I get too lost. Okay, so the next things we're going to talk about that's very, very important. We're going to lay down some groundwork here. Along with zones, the biggest thing to keep in mind is the phases of the game. Now, this will be its own YouTube video, and this has, I think it already might be, or at the very least, you guys have heard it before. We're going to be talking about the different phases of the game. The reason why the phases of the game are important is because phases of the game can help us determine very crucial and important details about the situation at hand, which can be very effective in informing our decision making and taking the burden off of making too many decisions and stuff like that. This is going to be very, very, very powerful for us. So, what do I mean by that? Well, let's begin. Right here, we have what's called the Point War. Now, the Point War is the first phase of the game. Right when you load in and you hear, fight! Basically, what's going to happen is you guys are going to duke it out. And this is usually where the most important decisions are going to be made, from here on out. Now, if you're fighting a Gogeta 4, you're probably going to back off. Honestly, I would recommend backing off anyway. And we can talk ad nauseum about all of the different ways that you can navigate around start situation, depending on your character. I have done it before. If you guys want me to, I'll do it again. But I will go over some basic strategies in a future video. But essentially, this is very, very important. Making the decision to be aggressive, making the decision to be defensive, but not overly defensive. These are important things to make. And the reason why is because this is the single most balanced position we're going to get. We will talk... Oh, yo, thank you for the sub with Prime. I appreciate it, Galen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Or Gale and Gale, I think. Not Galen. I'm going to call you Gale. just in case. Unless you want me to call you something else. But thank you guys so much for the subs. I'm surprised I retained so many subs. Thank you guys so much for dealing with my hiatus. But, you know, let's go out and get in there. Anyway, Fuzzy, you know what to do if you're still here. Anyway, point being is basically this is a completely even position. We have the same amount of health. We start with the same amount of meter. We could theoretically start with the same characters. Different team configurations obviously change and shift this position a little bit in one side or the other. For example, Gogeta 4 has so much priority here. But again, there's counterplay. There's really unique interactions that can happen here. But overall, this is the single no problem, Galen. This is the single most important and balanced that the game will likely be. It does not get more balanced than this. So the decisions that you make here are critical. Once the opening gambit is decided and you guys start basically, okay, we jumped away, and now we're starting to play neutral proper. Now we start playing neutral properly. What's happening here? What is our goal? Well, at the beginning of the game, which we will call the opening phase, basically, you have one goal. Your goal is to develop your team. Now, you've probably heard me use that word before, develop. It is a chess term. What is it? What exactly do you mean by that? Well, this team is pretty good, the team on the left. Both of these teams are pretty good, but they do require meter. So characters like Adult Gohan and characters like 18 and even Kefla, they require a little bit of meter, you know? Now, they don't need meter. Like, let me be clear. Adult Gohan can do this. Like, Wawa did it for a while. It was a struggle bus, but you can theoretically do this. Is it ideal? No. And especially if you have Kefla in the back, because Kefla is so good at dealing with things. She's very good at controlling space and the meta, but more importantly, she has a very, very crucial advantage that a lot of characters don't. Well, more characters do nowadays, but she has a very crucial example that is pretty important. He builds a lot of meter. That's almost 2.5 bars. I could push that to 2.5 bars, but I'm not going to for the sake of the video, because it'll take me forever to get it, because it is really tight. But the point is that she builds a lot of bar. In that one combo alone, if I hit you again, you are dead. If I hit that character alone, again, even with this team, they are dead. If I don't extend again. So if I don't extend, and that's without extensions, by the way. That is literally another combo and potentially 1-1-3, or tag JDR 1-1-3. Or if I want to be Adult Gohan, I can level 2 1-1 and bring Kefla back in and continue my development. This is very, very important. This is your goal in the first part of the game. Now you might be wondering, what do I do if I don't play Kefla? Well, as long as you have a really good point, you can visit all of our team building. We have a bunch of team building VODs. I'm sick of team building. I will briefly touch on it, but basically, in a point, you want a character that has very good damage. You want a character that has very far and advanced reaching pokes. You have characters that synergize and utilize assists very well. And you want to have a character that is also potentially self-sufficient, but has good mix-ups with assists when they're available. If you have these things in a character, you will probably be okay. And you have a good shot at winning the point war. Characters like this would be Team Gohan, Blue Ku, Gogeta Blue, obviously. Both of the Gogetas are fantastic on points. I think I already said Blue Goku. Kefla, your base Vegeta, Kid Buu. My world is your oyster, Generally speaking, when you're in this phase, you don't want to spend meter. Now, you might be wondering, you're like, probably, but Ken, they fixed the thing where now they have meter penalty. Yeah, that's true. Oops. Like now, yeah, that's true. But look what's happening here, right? Suddenly, I'm meter positive. And I did a lot of damage. That's pretty cool. But here's what I'm not doing. Developing Gohan. I'm meter positive, so obviously that's fantastic, but I'm not as meter positive as if I did this. Oops. My god, that assist is... Oh, I forgot. I don't want to do that poke, actually. It'll probably be fine done. You know, you get the point. Point is, if I do this... Yeah. Even with an assist, let me keep it simple, actually. Let me not even bother with the regen. That's about just as much meter, but I can push that, though. I can push this. You get the point. I can push this, though. I can... Let's see. My timings are off. Yeah. Well, you guys get the idea, but the point is I can build a lot of meter here. I can even potentially... do something like that, depending on how I want to extend it. But, yeah. Assist is so slow. Please buff this assist. But the point is that if I don't spend meter and whatnot, while I do lose a little bit in damage, I am keeping what I want to, depending on my assists, and I can build a little bit more than I normally would. Which is pretty important. So that's from 0 bar. If I go from half a bar... See if I do... God. This is what too much Elden Ring does to you guys, by the way. Does to your brain. I'm not even a bar meter positive. I'm missing that bar. And you might be wondering, is that bar really necessary? Do I need that much? Yes, because that's an EX move. So, when do you want to spend EX moves with your characters? When you have an abundance of meter and you have enough to develop, that's when you can start thinking about spending EX moves. But in the earliest part of the game, just because you have half a bar and your EX move is broken doesn't mean you should spend it. It doesn't mean that you should spend it. Your priority in the first phase should always be for your point. And also, Kefla doesn't need it. Because Kefla, most points, they don't need that half a bar. Or they don't need that half a bar. Like, they can play neutral much more effectively than a lot of other characters can. These are... a lot of the point characters are very privileged, guys. You don't need those broken EX moves. Just play the game, focus on navigating a position properly, and I guarantee you're going to be winning a lot more games, and your decision-making is going to be a lot cleaner. So that's the first phase. Now, what happens when we win the point war? What does winning the point war look like? Well, winning the point war, if I'm Kefla, ideally would probably look something like this. So if I win the point war, ideally, would look like this. Where... Actually, hang on. So if I won... Let's give it 1 level, just to be generous. So right here, this is what winning the point war would look like at the end of it. Winning the point war and winning the opening phase... Adult Gohan is now fully developed. Maybe I have a little bit of bar left over because I successfully killed a character and I did 1-1-3 or whatever. I took a little bit of damage as Kefla because that's going to happen. You get hit by random stray shit. But important thing is, this team is dead. They're probably going to have a lot more bar than me. Like, they're probably going to have, like, you know, maybe around, like, 3.5 bars around there. But it doesn't matter. I have a full health character and a fully developed adult Gohan. This Gohan actually has to hit me in order to get the development off. Now, if you bring in Beerus, that's fine. Like, if Beerus comes in, you might be wondering, oh shit, that's a lot of bar for Beerus, you know? Yes, but the thing is Beerus is a character whose toolkit works a lot better when he has a lead. So basically, because his toolkit is very, 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 very centered around screen control, it's very centered around precise positioning and forcing aggression out of a player. You don't have to be aggressive here. Now that I'm in this position, I can chill. I don't have to like attack you and try to punch you. Like I can afford to be like, hey, no. Oop. You know, I could afford to just be like, yo, we're chilling. You know, like I don't need to approach you. And then if you dodge that and you jump over the assist, I'm like, oh, okay, fine, that's fine. We'll just go back. Now I can be a little bit more patient. And because I don't have to fish for those openings, I started putting pressure on my opponent. You have to basically try to catch me as Beerus. And Beerus is not exactly the most effective at moving forward. Now, if they're really good at neutral, this isn't a problem. However, if you're not good at neutral and this character is not not something that you're used to playing, or if you're playing Adult Gohan, or if you're playing a character like Super Broly or Janemba, moving forward is very, very, very tricky. Because Janemba here is probably going to EX Slash a lot. That EX Slash doesn't advance him. It's not a Lariat. It doesn't matter. Slash. I don't care. I'm just going to, chill. I'm just chilling here, bro. I'm not doing shit. I'm chilling. And then, you're going to try to move forward, and I'm going to be like, nope. I'm going to 2H. I'm going to, nope. Like, I have so much control in this particular situation. Now, does this mean I'm going to win? Not necessarily, because things happen in this game, and if you're very, 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 very good, you know how to play from behind, you know what you need to do, you know how to fish for openings, you know how to capitalize on your openings, you understand neutral, you're a subscriber to WTG, no, I'm just kidding, and you basically know what to do, so you can equalize this position. But if you are the undeveloped, if you are Pink Gohan here, your number one priority is to stabilize the position. How do we stabilize it? Get a hit. Get a hit, stabilize the position, complete your development, and now you are in a situation where things are going to look pretty wild. Because if you get a stray hit, right? And I mean any stray hit. Let's see what the damage values look like. You get any stray hit, right? Ah, I wanted to grab. Point is, you guys saw what was about to happen there. That Adult Gohan was about to, like, be in a really bad situation. That was not a fun situation for that Adult Gohan to be in, even from that little bar. And the reason why that Gohan, or why I would be in a bad situation, is because, well, let's be clear. Oh my god. I can't use the stick anymore. I'm, like, so alien to this controller right now. Oh my god, that was a lag spike. That was not me. That was stream lag. Now I can't do it. Oh my god. This is where people stop watching, I swear. But I'm trying to make a point so that way you guys can get it. Because I want you guys to see this, right? I don't think I can... Whatever, I'll just do the one I did earlier. Oh my god. There we go. Look at that damage. Look at that damage that I just did. So I completed development for Gohan, and I brought Beerus in on his strongest position here. What does this mean? Well, Beerus' biggest issues on, neutral, not Oki. Beerus has completed his development. I have done a massive shit ton of damage, and more importantly, this is a level 3 situation. Which means I have a couple of things that I can do. I can... Oop, I messed it up. But I can 50-50 with high-low here. I can sneeze, back off, debate spark. I can... If I have enough bar left over... if I have enough bar left over, like I would here... I can even do this. If you wake up and block, like let's say Adult Gohan blocks after, let's say Adult Gohan Jesus Christ. Let's say Adult Gohan blocks after, level 3. Let's say he guesses right on the 50-50, right? I need to practice. Let's say he guesses right on this, right? I can 50-50 him again with Beerus, because I have that half a bar saved. If I have that half a bar saved. And the combo that I did was not very optimal. With Adult Gohan, you can actually push a little bit more, and that's assuming, a lot of things. But the point is, in the position that we were in just now, this Gohan's dead. This Gohan is dying if he gets hit. So, because we're smart, we don't want to lose any characters. So the most likely situation here for this Gohan, now that we're in the mid-game, is to Spark. Boom. And this is an example, very specific example. Obviously, your games may not look like this, but I do think it is pretty realistic to think about the games in these terms, because you can be in these positions. In fact, I'm sure some of you probably have a PTSD response of being in this position, being like, oh yeah, no, I get it. But if you're wondering, this is what people call momentum. This is how your games can snowball out of control. Like, have you ever been like, all right, I'm good, I beat their point, and then they just steamroll you, and you're like, whoa, man, how the heck did they do that? That's a pretty good example of how. All it takes is a single well-placed hit to throw a wrench in you. Getting hit in this game is so dangerous, because you will get too touched, and you will be put into positions, and the more bar that you have, the more likely it is that a character is going to die, even from full health. This is how comebacks happen, right? But now you guys can see what it's like. So now here's the thing. With that in mind, now you probably have a good idea of why, even though we can chill if we're in the mid game and we have a lead, you can't relax. You can't be like, oh, I'm just gonna zone. Oh, I don't have to move forward. Yes, you do. Because if they're alive, there is a chance. Remember that. Write that down in a notepad. If they are alive, they have a chance. Do not give them a chance. Now, basically, the privilege that being in the lead affords you is that you don't need to capitalize on every single risk. Meaning you can basically be a little bit more choosy with when you want to engage with your opponent than your opponent can. Your opponent needs to find an opening immediately, and you need to be aware of that, and you can use that knowledge to your advantage and kind of control them a little bit. But do not give them a chance. Do not let opportunities go simply because you're confident in your defense and you don't need to move forward. All it takes is a lag spike. All it takes is a good 50-50. Like, I don't care how good your blocking is. You're getting hit by this. Someone is getting hit by this at least half of the time. You're getting hit by this at least half of the time. You do not want to be in this position. So if that's the case, don't take a risk. Do what you can. Preserve your team. Make sure you're navigating the position. And when you see an opening, do not get cocky. Do not get arrogant. Take it. Take it and solidify your lead. So, to recap, mid-game, what is the big thing about the mid-game? What is the number one goal? If you are behind, Stabilize the position. You could stabilize the position with a level 3. You could stabilize the position with a well-placed hit. If you guys are optimal and you guys are good at putting out damage with your team, even if it's only 2 people there, then you are in a pretty decent spot. You are in a pretty decent spot. Complete your development if you need to. Your development should be fairly okay. You know, like you should be able to do something, you know, effective and be able to mount a threat. Whatever development means to you, depending on your team, you must know what that is. Complete it if your point is dead, and so on and so forth. And that's your number 1 goal. Stabilize the position and equalize it, so that way now we're back into a mid game that's fairly even, where now both of you will feel the pressure to try to get a hit over the other. That is why, by the way, if you're wondering, why close games tend to be so hype when you watch them at high level. Like when you watch them in tournament and you see 2 people and they're neck and neck, where character's dead now, another character's dead, this character's dead, that character's dead, they're both at half health. That is what's so intense, because they both feel it. It isn't just a, oh no, he might lose this. Oh, and he made a comeback. No, it's a, shit, we're both going to have to punch each other in the face, real light. No, I'm kidding. But we both have to do everything we can to come out on top, because it's not guaranteed. They both feel the pressure, and because they feel the pressure, you as the audience feel that tension, and that's what makes those games the most exciting. So whatever you do, try to stabilize the position. Now, obviously, if you have a lead, you have 2 goals. One is a main goal, the other one is a sub goal. Sub goal is basically do not let them equalize the position. How can you do that? Well, if you get touched but they drop it, raw tag out, rotate your team, manage your health to make that game as long as humanly possible for them. Because whenever you have blue life, like for example, in the position here, right? Let's say we're back in the position that we were in earlier, right? You know, let's say we're in this position, right? With Adult Gohan, but I'm gonna do Kefla now. And I go for this, and I get reflected, and then he raw tags, and I don't capitalize on the raw tag. Adult Gohan's gonna get whatever blue health he had, which is pretty sizable chunk if you remember the combo. It's gonna get that blue health back. If he gets that blue health back, that basically means that I need to be more optimal to kill him now. I can't just kill him off of a straight hit. There are some hits that just straight up won't kill him anymore if I don't have the bar for it. This is very, very, very important to keep in mind. Yeah, well, you don't want to necessarily do that when they're on the ground. Most people are going to drop the combo when they're in the air, and you want to wait and look for opportunities to tag out, or if you get a hit and whatnot, manage to wrestle it out, special tag in, DHC in. The point is, get your character out. If it gets you 2H'd, you have a problem. There's something wrong, and you should probably evaluate what's going on and what you're doing that's getting you 2H'd, because it's not the raw tag, it's the timing in which you choose to do so. That is equally important. When I say raw tag, I don't mean literally hold tag the entire time you're getting comboed and praying that they drop. I mean literally do your best. Oh, thank you for the resub, guys. I appreciate it. You guys are cool. I appreciate it. But yeah. So, man, this is not updating. I have to update these. But my point being, right, is that if you guys have these situations, right, make sure you are preserving your team. That is your sub goal. But your main goal is to cement your lead. How do we cement a lead? By killing another character, or by putting them in a position where both characters are a touch away from death. If you can do that, you have cemented your lead, and you have now maximized your chances of victory. Does that mean you're going to win? No. Anything can happen. It is a fighting game. It is a game where there is an element of luck, a little element of RNG, but most importantly, it is a question of skill. And you can make a mistake here. And if you make a mistake, you will pay the consequences, especially in a high damage game like this. It's not guaranteed, but that is your number 1 goal, is to cement that lead. Which brings us to the end game. What is an end game? An end game is basically when either 2 characters are dead on one team, or all of the characters look like this. This is roughly an end game. right here. Even though Kefla is full health, if this position, by the way, if this position ever happens, this is deeply unfortunate, and it would be very, very, very rare. But even in this incredibly unlikely and unrealistic position where this team has full health and they're managing their health properly, you can still, this is still considered an end game. Why? Because any stray touch here, no matter how much bar you have, is probably going to kill. And if it kills, obviously we just start running the Gatling on a bunch of teams. This is considered an end game position. Your number one goal here is to now you might be wondering, oh, my number one goal here is to win. No, your number one goal here is to manage risk. What that means is you now need to be extra careful because you will probably lose the game. And now the person with the lead's goal is obviously to win. Both of your goals are to win, essentially. But it depends on how much health the opponent has. So, for example, if you have one character and your opponent has 3, your number one goal for that comeback, equalize the position. Once you equalize the position, navigate the position to a victory. It sounds, it's a lot easier said than done, obviously. But that is your number one goal. And also capitalize on their opportunity. Now, keep in mind that they're going to try to preserve their team. So if they're very, very good and they're in a situation where they reflect, and you can get a 2H, ooh, that's big. Especially if you have a lot of bar, if you have a good 2H combo, if you have spark. These are situations which would be very, very important. And essentially, in the end game, you're behind, equalize the position. If you guys are dead even, your goal, minimize your risk, maximize your potential. In other words, do not take anything unless you are 100% sure that there is a way for you to convert that. One of the biggest things that I see that has led people to death is unnecessary zoning when you're behind and then they get super dashed and die. Or most tragically, press 1 if you've made a mistake or if you've seen your favorite player make a mistake and then it was all over when they were making a comeback, all because they messed up and took an unnecessary risk that they did not have to take. Do not do this. These are how the phases of the game can essentially impact our decision making and how we can discuss a little bit about positioning. And we kind of covered it, which, we covered the next session in this one. But this is pretty much it. I think I can combine the next one, actually. We can just go straight on. I think we guys understand what a position is now, right? So we'll just change phases of the game to phases of the game / positioning. So, if you guys are in a situation like that, that is deeply unfortunate. But now that we know that, guys, do you have any questions for me or anything that I can answer for you? Do you guys have any questions about the phases of the game or any way that I can, or anything that you would like me to elaborate further on? Is there a situation that's been kind of bothering me? Or, I'm sorry, any situation that's been bothering you? Any questions? Okay. All right. We're going to go ahead. Oh, not on this section, but I can think of it this time, but I'll ask if anything comes to my head. Fine. All right. Now, here's the one that we're all probably waiting for. Because this is the one that has to do with team building. Kind of. But this one is going to be identifying your folks. Thank you so much, Rob. Nice to see you here. Welcome to the chat, guys. I'm so happy to see so many fresh faces. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Identifying your pokes. So, first things first is we need to define a poke. A poke is essentially something that you can throw out that can control a certain amount of space. It controls a region while being able to convert into pressure or damage. So, for example, if you throw out a lariat and you call an assist, that's a combo. A lariat would be a poke. If you're one of the Gokus, a 2M would be a poke. A 5M would be a poke. If you're Lab Coat 236H and those kinds of specials would be a poke. If you're Vegito, your 5M, 5LL, these are huge pokes. Your pokes are kind of a big deal. And identifying them is very, very important. I'm going to give you the keys to understanding them based on what we've talked about so far with zones and positioning and the phases of the game. Because these pokes, we can now... I'm going to give you the tools to evaluate the quality of these pokes. So, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of interaction range here. What characters do you want me to look at? You guys can choose the 3 characters on either side. I will do 1 character per chatter. But what character would you like to see my process and how I identify a poke in order to basically use this for demonstration purposes? UI Goku, done. Tohan, of course, done. Anyone else? Come on, guys, pick some. Let's pick some characters. Cell. Okay. Beerus, very nice. Okay, we got Beerus. Next. Kefla. I don't know why we picked Kefla, but okay. You literally had the ability to be a little bit creative. I already have UI here, so it has to be a unique character. Goku Black. Baby. I'm so glad somebody called Goku Black before Baby. I do not like Baby in the slightest, so I'm glad I don't have to do that one. Anyway. So, one of the things that I like to identify, I don't do this with every character because at a certain point, it's pretty easy. But this is essentially the thought process behind what I consider easy. Behind what I consider to be pretty common sense. So obviously, this is a poke. This is a poke. That's 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 a poke. That is technically a poke. That is a poke. That is a poke. That's pretty cool. All of these moves control a various degree of space. I could theoretically do this in the air, but this is a bit slow for a poke, you know, and also very risky. So it does technically count, but what do we define as a poke? A poke is basically anything that allows you to control the degree of space while being able to convert into pressure damage. So for example, this, I can vanish. If I have a full screen assist, I can kind of take my turn. Maybe not with that assist, but yeah. Obviously, I don't need to tell you how dumb that is. But you might be wondering, okay, well, I would never use these moves in neutral. I'm glad, because not all of them are. Just because you have a poke does not mean all pokes are created equal. You need to find what the best poke is for every particular situation. So for example, 5M has pretty decent reach. This is not bad. However, your opponent has too much time to react. That second hit takes way too long. I forgot where I was going. We're going to go to info display. Let's see. This takes way too long. Frame 25. and it doesn't cover that much distance to begin with. So it does not hit until frame 25. That is way too much time, and I have to be way too close to the opponent. If I'm any farther, it whiffs, and I'm minus 45 right in front of my opponent. This is not a very good poke. Now this, you will see this in every high-level move, or every high-level fight with UI. This is a very fantastic jam. It is very fast. Actually, it's kind of slow, but I thought it was faster. Oh, there we go. Depends. 11 frames? That's on the slower side, but that's okay. 2M is a nice poke. Now, that's pretty cool. Now, 2M doesn't have too much reach. But, you know, you have a lot of control here. Now, this is very good, but it's stationary and it's kind of easy to avoid. And if they jump and I vanish, I actually lose my frame advantage, which is kind of a problem. For example, like if they jump right as I do this and I vanish, I'm probably in trouble. Now, point is, this JM, very powerful. It's really, really, really good at controlling space. I could do this, but this is a little bit short. I could do this, which will hit my opponent, but it takes frame 34. Now, this is frame 19. I can definitely use this for a poke, but it's expensive. And kind of hard to time assist with, you know? Do you want to call it when Goku is still 10? Yeah, you want to call it when Goku, right before he passes through the opponent, but still close enough to hit the opponent. So, obviously, you have a great situation here. So these pokes are stuff that you can use to threaten a neutral. In other words, these are things that your opponent has to keep in mind and be very, very mindful of and very careful about when fighting a UI Goku. Basically, if you land, you can expect a 236 HFES bar. If you're jumping around a lot, you can expect him to do this. You can expect him to do something like that, or 2S, 5S, and then jail into vanish. You can expect a lot if you're not careful. You know, you can expect him to jump in with a JM, good air to air, or try to poke you on the ground with JM. Now, you might be wondering, you might be realizing his pokes are pretty interesting, but they don't really seem all that special. Now you're beginning to realize why this character doesn't see that much play anymore. It's because while these pokes are interesting and he doesn't necessarily need them, he can get away with them. You know, it is still, you know, not the best. It is not the strongest or cleanest of pokes, and that is definitely something that you will have to kind of contend with when playing this character, and that is a trade-off that you would have to make. But a good way to identify what his pokes are is to examine 2 dimensions. Well, 3 dimensions, which we will cover in detail with Maai, which is the angle of attack, the time it takes for attack to reach a certain distance, and of course the distance that the attack takes that the attack can reach. That's very, very important. So because UI has pretty slow pokes, this is a character that we can assess has to be played at a much closer range than most other characters. He's not like Kefla, where he can kind of hang around here, and then he can 5M, he can Ki Blast. He actually has to get in a lot closer to become a threat, which is something that if your opponent's aware of, your opponent can use that to their advantage. So definitely keep that in mind. But we could still learn a lot just by messing around, being like, okay, so that controls it, that's 21, that's not too slow. It's actually pretty good. It's a lot faster than most Ki Blasts. Most Ki Blasts tend to be... It's about as fast as Kefla's Ki Blast, actually, at this distance. This is a very fast move. It's a very fast move, and it's very, very difficult to react to. And then at this range, we can expect a 19-frame Lariat. That's pretty huge. That's not a bad move. And then, of course, if your opponent approaches him, notice how this character is all defensive mechanics. And the reason why is because he's not really supposed to approach his opponents, but if he needs to, he has the tools to do so. He's got a decent Lariat. So definitely something to keep in mind when playing UI. Gohan, on the other hand, look how the dimensionality of the game completely changes. So now, it's even faster than Kefla's, actually. Now I have a 23-frame Ki Blast from full screen. I have a Lariat that reaches fairly far. with really good frame advantage from that distance as well. I have a very far-reaching 2M. That sucks, but I do have this. So if I understand my ranges, I can go ahead and hit them here. So that's very, very important. I have this, so now I can control an angle UI actually can't unless he commits to a reversal. I can do this, and I can also do this. So I have multiple ways of attacking, and if you approach me, I can legs, if you're not careful. So right here, Adult Gohan's toolkit, or I'm sorry, Teen Gohan's toolkit is a little bit more defensive than UI's, but you can tell he's a lot more effective at controlling range than UI is, and he's a lot more effective at certain distances as well. As you guys can see. So Teen Gohan has some pretty good pokes. This poke is incredibly effective, especially as we get closer. The 2M is very scary. You don't want to get hit by that. To be honest, you just don't want to get hit by this character in general. And then, of course, the JL, you know, if you get hit by JL, you know... If you get hit by JL, you're not in for a good time. You are not in for a good time. Look at that damage. You are really not in for it. And that was off of a JL confirmed for half a bar. Like, you do not want to get hit by this character at all. And then, of course, you're closer to the corner. You can actually push that. So, you know, try your best to avoid getting hit by Teen Gohan. But, as you can see, very big threats here. But the reach is a little bit lackluster on some of these pokes. While they do reach farther than UI in comparison, he is still a more defensively oriented character. He's not as effective at rushdown the way a character like Blue Goku or Kefla might, who Kefla probably is closest analog because a lot of her tools are similar. So you want to definitely be careful. And also the hitboxes on his legs are wonky, so if you do this, you can actually be JM'd out of this. So be very careful. A character like Cell, let's see. So first thing I look for, range. Cell has fantastic range. I like all of these. And while this one doesn't necessarily hit full screen until the end, it does control Zone 2. And Zone 2, this Ki Blast is actually extremely fast. So if my opponent is trying to get in, they're being a little bit aggressive, I can check them. Now, the closer you get to Cell, the more dangerous he becomes. He has a fantastic JM, which can be used to attack an opponent at any range. That is going to be your main poke here. JM is a very powerful poke. Even moving back, it's very good. It hits low to the ground. As you can see, very, very, very strong. His 2M will catch people if you're not careful. He does have a pretty good way of catching opponents backing off. You know, he's got a beam that he can convert off with Vanish. So on and so forth. So, pretty good. Pretty good stuff here. But perhaps his most premier poke... It is an anti-air, but it also is a poke. You can use this to poke your opponent, especially if you notice that your opponent is being a little bit too aggressive. So while his toolkit is a little bit more defensive, it's not quite like Teen Gohan's. He can actually move forward and aggress a little bit and control space right in front of him a little bit more effectively than Teen Gohan can and prevent them from moving away from him because he will catch them because of the sheer reach of his normals like 2M. So overall, these are the kinds of things that I would look for, and I look for his pokes, okay? Is this like Blue Goku? Is he striking as an aggressive character? No. But knowing what these pokes are and when I can use them is very, very important because this is reach. So definitely something to keep in mind. Now, Beerus is kind of an interesting character. Beerus technically has this, which is very good. He also has a Ki Blast, which is very good, but most of his pokes revolve around his orb set play. There you go. That's an example of Beerus play. It's going to revolve around the orbs. Now, the thing about him is that he basically sets orbs, you know, to do stuff with. And you can do some fun stuff with that. And you can do some fun stuff with them. Now, eventually, your opponents will get so overwhelmed that they will forget that you have this. They will forget that you have this. And most importantly, if you don't play Beerus, you probably didn't even know he has this. This. Press 1 if that terrified and jump scared you. Press 1 if that caught you completely off guard. And it does convert. This is very, very important. This is very good for capitalizing on people that try to run away from him. He is extremely effective. However, it only tracks on the ground. If he's in the air, it does not track. This is a very, very, very powerful tool. And definitely one worth keeping in mind. Now, is he as effective as other characters? Yes, actually he is. He's actually more effective than a lot of characters. But unlike those other characters, he has a higher skill floor. Meaning you have to have a certain amount of knowledge and understanding of neutral in order to take advantage of this character. And unfortunately, that understanding of neutral is going to basically not be covered within the purview of what I'm doing. It's not going to be covered in the purview of what I'm doing. So, unfortunately, it's not going to be covered. I mean, I can get you to master, but like, he requires so much attention to detail that he is rather difficult. But those are examples of how he pokes. His pokes is more about controlling zones around him. So notice how he's controlling pretty much all 3 zones. Because he can threaten this zone at any time, but he can also threaten zone 2. If I do this, notice how this orb is actually traveling upwards. If I do this, this orb is actually preventing people from jumping in, because it's deceptively high. Not only that, but if I see you ID, I can just catch your jump like that. I can catch your jump like that. I can catch your landing like this. I can maintain distance because I can do this. So I can do this and then back off. I can do this and then this to bring myself back in. He has a lot of ways of controlling space around him. And it is very, very dangerous to super dash him because if you're not careful, he can DP even in the air. And if he DPs, this DP does a lot of meter build, and while it won't do too much damage depending on his team, it's not going to tickle either, especially if he has 3 bars and he builds those 3 bars. Yeah, the end of this combo is going to be very, very, very unfun for you. But that's an example of how he can do this. Kefla is basically EX Tohan in neutral. She has the same Ki Blast, but she can control ranges much more effectively and much quicker than he can, while on average building more meter solo. She does build more meter than he does solo, however, he has more flexible routes that are more assist friendly, so with assists, his meter build skyrockets exponentially. However, he's spending an assist for that when he can also spend those assists in neutral. And if he's solo, Kefla's probably going to be the one that you want to be out of the 2. She can control this angle, which is rather steep, but she also has a very far advancing normal. Her heavy also has really good reach. She's got a fantastic Ki Blast. She can control the air. She can control the ground. This character is literally pokes the character. It is very, very easy for her to get in. And of course, unlike Tohan, this Tohan and her, this is like you versus the dude she told you not to worry about. This JM is massive. And so is her JH. That entire smear is a hitbox. She also has a really good jab for jabbing super dashes as well, but you don't even need to because JM will probably catch them first. This character is extremely dangerous in neutral. It's one of the reasons why she's, in my opinion, one of the best points in the game, but also really, really effective at what she does. It's also why she's really good at mid as well, on top of her fantastic assist. So, overall, you don't, you can see the pokes. I mean, it's fantastic. Now, Goku Black. Goku Black has some interesting pokes. So Goku Black doesn't have the best reach on anything, but his heavies are fantastic pokes. This is a decent poke. This is a commitment, but it is a poke. This is a commitment, but it is a poke. He arguably has the most famous poke, if you were around in the early phases of the game, God Slicer. This is very good at anti-airs now, so you can't super dash through this. You actually have to avoid this. Pretty nice. But these are an example of how to find pokes. You want to think about how much space that they control. You want to think about how much time they take. Are they slow? Are they fast? Do they cross a certain amount of distance very, very, very quickly? These are the things that you want to think about when actually structuring your pokes and figuring out what pokes you have with every individual character. Generally, I like to do this and then add assists on top of that, but we're not going to talk about assists until the next part. But are you guys following me so far? Do you guys have any questions for me? Anything that I can answer for you? Anything that you want to ask me about these characters in particular? Because I know all of them except UI. Rejumps. That's... I need education on rejumps. What about them? How to? I'm probably not the guy to ask for that, to be honest. There's a lot of like guides that you can find online, probably for your character specifically as well. Basically, the answer I'm going to give you is just practice. You know? Oops. Just practice. Get the delay on the super dash timing right, and the dash jump buffered. Oof. But yeah. Alright, do I have any other character? Okay, so for poking with Tohan Lariat, do you try confirming them with an assist, or do you mash out the rest of the inputs and hope that they hit? It's a very specific question. I don't know. To be honest, I would not throw out the Lariat. The most common thing I would do is probably, you need to think about why you're throwing out the Lariat in the first place. If you're trying to fish for like a cute hit, then, you know, you need to think about why you're fishing for that hit in the first place. Generally speaking, if they get hit by the assist, you do lose out on a lot of damage, but it's still a pretty good confirm. I only really mash out the hits if I know for a fact it's going to hit, or if I have a feeling that they're not blocking. But generally speaking, you don't want to be throwing out a Lariat, even if it can confirm. You don't want to be throwing out you don't want to throw out a Lariat without full-on expectation, or without a certain degree of forethought of what's going to happen next. Complete B&Bs are better than drop 3 jumps. That is true. But if your rejump are your BMDs, we're chilling. There we go. Oh, my bad. Oh, my bad. But yeah, you guys get the idea. Hopefully. All right. So now into some practical advice. What are some movement patterns you guys should adopt? Low-key wish I could land Tohan rejump more stable. Well, practice. Anyway. basic movement patterns. So, let's say you learned your re-jumps, you learn your things. What do I do in movement? Or what are my basic stuff that I apply a lot in movement? One of the biggest things that I use is IEDs, specifically super jump IEDs. So I like to dash forward, ID back. This is a very common movement pattern that you'll see a lot. And the reason why is because the dash gives a lot of freedom. Because the dash can turn into a moon jump. The dash can turn into a dash block. The dash can turn into, if I'm Tilhan, like a dash lariat. And the dash can turn into a poke. Can turn into a, if they're trying to get away from me, I can catch them, if I want to. These utilize your IEDs. Now, when are IEDs the most effective? I tend to use them when retreating from a zone, or I'm going to use them as a poke to come in, because this tends to avoid a lot of assists on the ground. But I tend to use this from zone 2 into zone 1, or from zone 2 into zone 3. And I use it as a way to basically evacuate and test out the waters. Notice how I go into zone 2 and then immediately evacuate into zone 3. This is if I want to see what my opponent's doing. And then obviously you want to mix it in with dash block, because eventually you're going to get, if you're fighting a Goku Black, it's going to be approximately 2 seconds. Oh my god, my hands. I can't. Yeah, I have to practice. It's going to be about 2 seconds before they decide to God Slicer you. So you can go ahead and just take that to your advantage. You can go ahead and dash block, reflect, blah, blah, blah. Do whatever you want. But yeah, these are very, very basic movement patterns. IED is the core of my movement. I like super jump IEDs because I can also float, I can fast fall. Very, very powerful. Another one that I use and add to my repertoire are the different types of super jumps, specifically super jump forwards. So obviously we have the super jump forward, float back. Very, very common pattern. This is very, very, very good if there's a lot of shit going on underneath you and you're not really sure what's happening, and you want to basically retreat into a safe position while maintaining a particular... Oh, fuck. I cursed again. Sorry, YouTube. But basically, you're retaining a certain level of control. I can do this, and then, I can do this, and back off if I need to. I can avoid it. I can do whatever I want. I can, poke if I need to, and I can basically perfectly line up, my poke. Like if I have something that hits at an angle, but only a very specific angle, I can basically float until I make sure that that angle's covered, and I can go ahead and threaten that. Very, very important. This is very underrated. Another really good duplicate is, one of the biggest things, a lot of people tend to dash block. I don't dash block very much. I tend to dash block when my opponent is in the air for a specific reason, but I don't really use it as my default method of moving from zone to zone. You might be wondering, why? Well, somebody actually said it earlier. I'm not sure if they're still in the chat, but they were 100% correct. If you dash block and then you get caught dash blocking, you are safe, but you lost neutral. A very, very, very flexible way of covering that distance is short hop. So a short hop is what I call it, is basically a super jump fast fall while holding back. So I super jump and then I immediately fast fall, and it covers about the same distance as a dash block, and it's safe because I can still air dash to come in, and I can still backdash to catch them if they come in. While I can't really do that, it takes too much time after the dash block, and I don't cover as much distance. So, short hopping is definitely my go-to thing. It's also my go-to retreat, because sometimes, a big issue, and we'll talk about this next time, is over-retreating, where I see people basically try to evacuate a situation and go all the way back when they could just maintain pressure here. They can avoid danger and still maintain an attack position where, hey, I can just come back in at any point and kind of mess with you. Hey, I can prevent you from running away. If you think I'm going to let you get away from me and we're going back to full screen, you're mistaken. That sort of thing. I have a lot of ways that I can capitalize on my opponent here, and I feel like short hop is a fantastic method of control. So definitely, if you have to learn and you want to learn the basics of my movement, well, I guess it's high-level movement in general. It's not really my movement, but what I like to use a lot, basically super jump ID, short hop. Very, very, very powerful shit. Now, you can also do the moon jump, which basically gives you the most amount of control. I mean, that's not a true moon jump, but honestly, nobody really does a true moon jump anymore. They're very effective for zoning, so if zoning is something that you really want to deal with, then go for it. But honestly, it's not necessary because you can literally just hold S and then dash jump. Like, just buffer a dash jump. Oops. You know, you could do that. Not really frame perfect, but... Oof. You know, you have some stuff here. There's some stuff that you can do. Now, I generally use this if I notice that my opponent is getting way too far ahead of me, and if I have a full screen assist. So, for example, let me get rid of... Like, for example, if I'm Goku Black, right? So something that I like to do is I like to jump forward and call a full screen assist. This gives me almost complete ownership of the ground. We'll talk about, and obviously, as you can see here, if it gets hit, it's a free conversion. But basically speaking, this gives you complete control over the ground. It gives you control over the air. You can land safely, and you have time to guess what's, or you have time to react to whatever the situation is calling for at that time. It is very, very effective with full screen assists. If you guys use beams, if you guys use anything. More importantly, something that I also forgot to mention as well is that this extends the range of assists. So ordinarily, it would be here. If I call here, it would be like that. But if I do float, I can extend the range of my assist and make them deal with the assists while retreating to a safe position, which is very important if you guys are playing strike assists. If you guys are playing lariat assists especially, or DP assists, this is how you're going to make the most out of them. So definitely learn the float back. Learn the float back. It's very, very important. But these are more or less the most basic movement patterns that you're going to find in DBFZ, and it's very, 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 very crucial to learn them. And they do take a little bit of practice. Even for me, I'm out of practice. As you guys can see, I'm flubbing some of my inputs. But if you guys can get them clean enough to do them in real matches, you guys will notice a night and day improvement. So if you guys want some stuff to practice from this, practice your super jump IEDs. You know, a great exercise, making sure you can do them on both sides. You know, I like to practice these with cross-ups as well, just so I have something to do. Get them done, you know. If you guys are feeling really cheeky, you know, practice your floats and your fast falls. Practice your floats and your fast falls. That'll definitely be a big help for you. So definitely keep that in mind. That's a good way to practice that. As for your floats, practice making your ranged assist or your short range assists hit while floating back, and then trying to convert them as best as you can. These are good things that you can practice. It'll give you an idea of the range of your assists and how to manipulate them. We'll talk about that, again, a lot more in depth in part 2 or however many parts I do. So definitely keep that in mind. But those are the movement patterns that I'm going to use the most. And then, of course, finally, dash blocking. When do we dash block, or why do we dash block? So the advantage of dash block becomes very, very apparent when you have an opponent that likes to up back a lot. So if you fight that guy that's like, man, he's always floating, he's always trying to get away from me, he's always trying, he's always trying to avoid me, he's running away, blah, blah, blah. Dash block is very powerful. And here's why. Because if you dash block, you can easily cancel into reflect. So if they call an assist and think that they're going to get away with it, no, they're not. If they super dash you, no. When you dash block and your opponent is in the air, they have one choice, land or die. And either or, it can lead to a checkmate situation if they're not careful. So I'll dash block and then I'll IED back and I'll probably catch like a lariat assist, and the lariat assist will whiff. Now they're down now they're lacking a positional advantage here. They're about to land and I still control the ground. I'm still on the ground. I still have all sorts of control, all sorts of tempo. They can't really do anything about it. So that's when you'll see a lot of dash blocking on the ground. It's very, very, very powerful. But if both players are on the ground, you don't really want to dash block, but you also don't want to stay on the ground either. The number one golden rule is if you're in the air, get back to the ground as quickly as possible. If you're on the ground and your opponent's in the air, stay on the ground. Do not give up your control. Do not get an do not try to go for an air-to-air. The safest time to attack an opponent is when they're landing. So if you want to make sure you can guarantee and maximize your chances, attack a landing. And you can do that the best from the ground. So if you're in the air, you want to make sure your opponent's also in the air. If your opponent's on the ground and you're in the air, it's a bad situation. If your opponent, however, is in the air, you want to be on the ground because 2H. Very, very, very effective. So if you see your opponent jumping a lot, remain grounded. If you see your opponent that remains grounded, jump a little bit more, but stay close enough to the ground that you can still deal with their threats. And you can still apply your threats a little bit more accurately. Because one thing that I see is a lot of people will just give up their advantage and, Cell can't really do anything. If I'm Goku Black and I run under this and I jump over his assist, he is FUCK'd. He cannot do anything about it. So, obviously, these are some basic rundowns. These are some basic tips that I hope help you guys. Anyway, do we have any questions on movement patterns? Do you guys have any questions about the movement patterns that you guys saw me display or talk about? I'm pretty new to the game. I can consistently do each movement technique, but I don't feel fluent and comfortable stringing them together and moving my character without thinking. Feels like there's no room to learn that in matches because I'm constantly being bombarded. How can you train that skill without just doing repetitive drills? Fight somebody that is of your skill level or weaker than you. That is the best way to practice. If you are a sub to WTG, you can also request movement drills from any of my Angel trainees. They would be more than happy to do it with you. If you're a tier 2 sub, I will do the movement drills with you. And I can help you out with that. But basically, that is the perfect way to practice. Practice makes perfect, but I think if you can run movement drills or fight opponents that you know are a little bit beneath your skill level, that will help you practice the techniques, but you're not going to get necessarily steamrolled if you make a mistake. And then once you get it comfortably against opponents weaker than you, then you want to start trying it against stronger and stronger opponents until you start basically just doing it automatically. That is the best way to do something like that. So whatever position, grounded or aerial, your opponent is, stay the opposite. Be confident in your position and be confident in the position you are in, and be mindful of yours and your opponent's threats in those positions. More or less, yeah, it's roughly the gist of it. I would say that that's a pretty interesting and pretty decent summarization of it. Obviously, these positions can get complicated very quickly. You are fighting. Like, a very good thing that I can definitely keep in mind that I notice a lot of my intermediate players really struggle with is, when you're an intermediate player, you're looking to make the game make sense. You're learning the rules, you're learning the systems, you're learning the structures of the game, you're learning the applications of certain tools, and you're trying to get to the next level with mastery. But the biggest thing is that when you're mid-level, that is generally the time where most people see the least improvement, and that is when people begin to quit. And the reason why is, I'm going to tell you a small secret. It's because you're fighting another human being. You are going to feel like you're never progressing because you're going to come across situations and you're going to come across people where the things that you're learning don't necessarily map onto very cleanly. So, for example, even earlier in the stream, if you guys were paying attention to the chat, if you were paying attention to the chat, you will have noticed that somebody said every time I try to raw tag after a drop combo, I get 2H'd. Well, something's happening there, right? I just gave a prescriptive thing, and somebody was like, well, I tried that and I died. That's going to happen. If you try anything that I tell you, you're probably going to die. You're probably not going to be super, super successful every time you try it. And the reason why you're probably not going to be very successful, is not because it doesn't work, but it's because these are guidelines. The guidelines on what you do heavily depend on what your opponent does. Your opponent, or in fighting games, what makes fighting games different from every other type of game, and what makes fighting games harder than every other type of game, and I mean it. I've played Elden Ring, right? I'm getting through it. It's not really that challenging, but it's still pretty challenging. I'm sure Sekiro will kick my ass. I'm sure Millennia will kick my ass. None of that compares to a fighting game where you are actively fighting another human being with the same options that you have in a roughly balanced situation. And it's very, 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 very different. And you cannot put yourself in a situation. It's kind of like when you're learning martial arts, right? Which is going to be a great segue, by the way. When you're learning martial arts and whatnot, you'll do a lot of, especially if it's a Japanese martial art, you'll do a lot of kata to kind of get the muscle memory and the movement and the significance of each movement and the application of each movement down into muscle memory. But you'll also do full contact sparring if you're doing something like jiu-jitsu. And the reason why you need to do that sparring is because while you could be like, oh, if my opponent goes for this punch, I can go for this specific takedown. Yes, but that's if they go for that punch. Are you ready for them to go for that punch? Because in that demonstration, you know that they're going for the punch because the idea is for you to practice. But being able to pull it off against a real opponent is very, very, very different. And that's why full contact sparring in martial arts is unbelievably important, because you're going to get put in various situations, and you're going to have to make sure that you are able to apply the knowledge that you are acquiring on the fly, which is a very, 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 very different take. So basically, guys, is if you follow any of the guidelines, you will be successful. Everything I'm talking about does work, but it depends on what your opponent's doing and how you respond to your opponent. It's like language. It's fluid. It's fluid. So definitely keep that in mind. And that's going to lead us to our last concept. You guys have probably heard me talk about this before if you guys have been in any other streams, if you guys have watched any of the other VODs on like YouTube or anything like that. This is going to be our last topic of the day. This is Maai. So what is Maai? I'm going to talk a little bit about Maai. Maai is basically the Japanese word for interval. Maai is spelled, or rather romanized, M-A-A-I. And it roughly translates to interval, and it is pretty much endemic in most martial arts, and pretty much every martial arts that you learn, in every martial arts discipline all over the world, they have a version of this. Another way you could think of Maai, I used the word earlier, is engagement distance. So, excuse me. What does Maai mean? Maai refers to the distance that you need to be at where you are able to actively attack your opponent meaningfully. So if you're within my 2M range, if you're within my 5M range, if you're within my 5H range with Blue Goku, this is Maai. But more importantly, Maai doesn't simply refer to spacing. It also refers to the angle of the attack. So for example, this covers an angle, this covers an angle because it's high-low, this covers an angle. All three of these options must be responded to very, very differently. And all three of these cover very, very, very different things. Maai is unbelievably important to learn because, or rather, we're going to learn about what this is now, because it is the thing that you're going to take with you for the rest of your Dragon Ball journey. And it is the most important thing to learn up front as a beginner. It doesn't matter if you're brand new to the game, and it doesn't matter if you've been playing the game for years or since launch. This is a very important concept to mention. And why this is important is because you need to master this. If you guys get the hang of Maai, congratulations, you have mastered DBFZ. Because it will help you assess the threats that are and are not there. So for example, if I'm Bluku, I don't give a shit about the other Bluku being in this range. But why? Isn't that dangerous? He could 5H. He could 2M. He could... Oh, wait. His 5M doesn't reach. Nope. It doesn't. And I know that. So if I'm in this distance, right? 2M's not going to reach. So I'm right here. I know that I'm relatively safe. If I block a 5H, that's fine, because the only pressure option he has after 5H is literally that. Now, he could stagger, if he's me, and go into my particular type of pressure. But otherwise, it's a wasted poke. And most people are not going to poke with a 5H because the conversion off of that is really not that high either. If I hit that full screen, like, yeah, I could spark it and kill you, but most likely I'm just going to rejump, you know? If that hits you, it's like, okay. Oops. You know, maybe I'll, like... Let me see if how much I can get off of 5H. 5H, not bad. What if I add an assist? Let me do some damage, actually. Not bad. Now what if I hit a 2M? That's a pretty substantial difference in damage. Excuse me. That's a pretty substantial difference in damage. Now, I could do some cheeky things. Like, I could do... which will definitely put the hurt on. But, again, because it's 5H, this type of combo is much shorter. And it's a lot more scaled as a result of it. Meanwhile, something like this gives me the opportunity to stack on damage on the beginning, which combo theory tells us is going to be a lot stronger of a conversion. So, basically speaking, even for Blueku, 5H, not the best. Now, if I'm in the corner, though, like if I'm near a corner, then obviously I don't mind 5H that much. Because now I'm gonna, you know, just do basic-ass loops. Like, I can do basic-ass loops, I can do... oh my god, the stream lag is... I can't quite do that, but, you know, you can delay it enough and get the JM there and then do your long loops, and, you know, you can tack on damage there. You can definitely make that hurt. But generally, mid-screen, and in neutral situations, 2M is better, because if I land that 2M in a similar distance, like, if I land that 2M near the corner, I could literally just... and now... I'm laying on even more hurt, you know? Because now I was able to squeeze in the big damage 236M, or 236M, which that one will hurt. That one will hurt. So, generally speaking, you're not going to see a lot of people fishing for 5H pokes, although I do. But that's a different conversation. They're going to mostly be fishing for 2M. So, I am keeping a distance that manages my opponent's threats while still maintaining the ability to apply my own. This is the essence of Maai. Maai refers to engagement distance, and the distance where you can most effectively pressure and attack your opponent while simultaneously being able to avoid your opponent's attacks instead. This is very, very, very tricky, and it refers to a lot of dimensions. We're going to be talking about this a lot. We will be doing an entire class on this. I've already done a class on this, but I'll do it again if you guys want me to. Just because it is that potent, and it is very, very important. And you probably have seen this as well. Have you guys ever felt pressured without your opponent ever actually doing anything? Like, have you ever felt somebody just move forward and you can't really describe why, but you felt the indescribable need to move back, even though they technically never pressed the button? Press 1 if you felt that, particularly if you're one of my students and you fought me. Press 2 if I've made you feel that way. Anyone else ever feel that way? Do you guys ever feel the need to move back? Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. So, you know, McLeod says, yeah, the one time you had training, I was like, why is he not moving? The reason why you don't have to move is because if I'm in a strong enough position, there's no reason for me to evacuate it. There's no reason for me to jump. There's no reason for me to get out and start messing around and giving up my positional advantage, especially if I know that I have the high ground. If you know, I know, I just made a reference, but I know that if my opponent knows that I have the advantage, they need to move. I don't. If they try to attack me, I'm going to kill them. I'm going to avoid them, and then they're going to basically land in a situation where they just gave up neutral. They don't want to do that. So, very, very important. So, that feeling that you guys get is because everyone has an intrinsic understanding of Maai, but nobody really knows how to refine it to the mastery level. For example, I've been playing a lot of Elden Ring lately. By the way, make sure to catch me on Twitch, guys. I'm going to upload a stream schedule probably tomorrow on Twitter, so definitely keep an eye out for that. But once I upload that stream schedule and whatnot, we will be doing a lot more casual streams. So I'm still going to be doing the DBFZ content, so you're still going to get masterclasses, training stuff and whatnot, Q&As, and hanging out with me, and I'll answer all of your questions and teach you guys Dragon Ball. But if you guys want to hang out with me in a more casual setting, make sure to attend the streams at the end of the week. I'm going to start doing some interesting, wacky streams. If you guys want, the VODs may end up on YouTube, but I'm going to be playing Elden Ring a lot more on stream. I'm going to be doing a lot more From Software stuff, and because I've recently gotten into that, so I'm going to start talking about that a little bit more, and I'm going to start doing classes on visual literacy for media. So I'm going to be teaching you guys basically visual grammar of video games, visual grammar of anime, and all of the cool stuff that you guys watch, cinema, and basically teach it to you not from the perspective of aspiring filmmakers, but more from the perspective of people who want to enjoy the media that they already enjoy more. So basically, the analogy that I use is it's like a sommelier hosting a class, not for other sommeliers, but for people who just want to enjoy and appreciate wine a little bit more. And if you want to enjoy and appreciate the stuff that you already like a little bit more, you can go ahead and join me towards the end of the week where I'll be doing more casual streams. Anyway, but yeah, point is that if you guys have felt that, it's because you have an intrinsic understanding of Maai, and everyone kind of understands that, because one of the things that I noticed that I do, and I still do it in Elden Ring, and I still do it all the time, but I see a lot of newer players, is that they always want to maintain distance, they always want to roll back, and some bosses are literally, you have to dodge to the side or towards the opponent in order to get past them. Because if you dodge back, dodge is invul in FromSoft games, but the recovery isn't, they will catch the recovery. And it's a pretty interesting little experiment of Maai, where because people are intrinsically aware, they know that they need to create distance because it's not safe to stay that close, but they essentially mess with the most basic reaction, which forces people to think a little bit more carefully about how they avoid certain attacks, and basically thinking about their positioning, making sure that they maintain enough of a distance where maybe they don't need to waste a dodge, they could roll into an attack to attack, and it can get pretty interesting. I do recommend that if you play fighting games, consider playing Elden Ring. You will learn a lot, especially as you study neutral. I may even host a class, an Elden Ring class, even though I'm not good at it by any means, but I can go ahead and explain Dragon Ball concepts and martial arts concepts through Elden Ring, so it's pretty cool. But the point being is that if you guys have felt that, you understand that there is a danger there. You guys understood that I have too many threats, there's too much pressure in where you want to be, so you feel the need to move. It's like the black aura that comes from an opponent when I feel like that. Yeah, that's actually a real phenomenon, McLeod. While it is not necessarily empirically backed by science in any metric, a lot of swordsmen and a lot of like fighters and whatnot, they call it like kenki, or like the spirit of the swordsman, where they can feel that intensity, that bloodlust, that danger that forces their instincts and whatnot. And while I do probably think that there's a real physiological phenomenon to explain that science could easily explain, I do think that calling it kenki, or the swordsmanship spirit, really is fantastic in selling what it feels like on a more understandable level. Because yeah, it could be like, oh, where your brain is just recognizing a lot of pattern recognition, so just triggering your fight, flight, freeze, or freeze response, blah 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, you could do that, but like,
I'm in danger.
Like, yeah, you could do that, but like, who cares? Calling it kenki and the oppressive swordsman spirit, not only does it sound more anime, which is pretty weeby but cool, I feel like it's a lot more poetic, and it does a lot more justice into the experience, in describing the experience of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that. So it's definitely something to think about. We will be talking about Maai going forward, but I did want to establish the introduction now. This is probably the most complicated of the sections. So do you guys have any questions of anything that we've talked about so far in the last 2 hours of stream? Do you guys have any final questions? Anything that you want to ask me? Anything that I can answer? So moving forward is pretty much taking the subsections regarding this class and putting them together. No. Moving forward is a lot more complicated than that. But basically, the art of neutral is literally learning how to navigate in and out of zone 2, which is the engagement distance, which is one of the reasons why we brought up Maai. Basically, to answer your question in full, Cloud, is that there is no safe way to move in and out of zone 2. It depends on your opponent, and that's something that you have to get comfortable with. And the fact that you're not comfortable with it is probably the reason why you're struggling so much, and it's probably the reason why a lot of people tend to, especially at this level, tend to give up on this game, except for the bad rollback. But it's one of the biggest challenges of fighting games is that you have to learn engagement distances. You have to hold that. There is no, it's I see this all the time with people quitting From Software games or quitting Elden Ring because they think it's too hard. It's not too hard. You can do it. It takes timing, it takes precision, it takes a mindset more than anything. Like, I can teach you, like, I already gave you earlier a bunch of movement patterns to get in and out of zone 2, and how to use each one of these movement patterns to create strategies. But at the end of the day, they're only going to get you as far as your opponent. Like, yeah, they look like I can use these against you. You will be able to identify what I'm doing if I fought a real opponent. And I'm not going to do the same things over and over again, but what might murder one opponent will get me killed against the next. It really depends on what your opponent is doing. And I think the problem, and I think the biggest issue in Dragon Ball that a lot of mid-level players and my own students really struggle with, and it's one of the reasons why once you guys get to a certain point, I've noticed that there's a drop-off in the engagement, even in WTG, as far as practice goes. That drop-off is probably coming from the fact that it is incredibly difficult to wrap your head around how do I move against a variable that I have literally no control over. You can't control what your opponent plays. You can't control the teams that they play. You can't control how they play. You can't control, you don't have any autonomy. They have as much autonomy as you do. How do you limit that? Because you're fighting all sorts of people, all sorts of teams, all sorts of mentalities, all sorts of aggression levels. And basically, what people want is they want to essentially think of the game like, okay, well, Ken says if I move in and out of zone 2 and I use my super jump IEDs or if I short hop, then I'll automatically beat this guy. No. You may beat someone. There will be a situation or two. And hell, even likely you'll probably see some consistency where you'll be able to beat a few people at a certain level. But once you start fighting for real, basically what I'm teaching you is how do you gain control of the situation. Like, for example, if you review my language from earlier, notice how I never said, oh, your goal is to win. Your goal is to hit the opponent. And zone, like, your goal is to do this. I'm like, no. If you're in a position, your goal is to stabilize the position. Your goal is to prevent your opponent from doing this or that. Your goal is to be patient. And, like, notice how I'm not promising anything. I'm just saying what your goals are, because those goals are what's going to snap your decision into focus. Like, it's going to snap your decisions into focus. And that is crucial if you want to play. It's very, very crucial if you want to do, to control the opponent. But more than anything, the best advice that I can give you about moving forward, Cloud, is you need to get comfortable dealing with opponents that you cannot control and learning how to take advantage and control them and kill them for the things that they want to do. That is the ultimate goal. And I think that goal is probably a lot more effective than giving you any sort of solid advice like, oh, just super jump more or anything like that. Because while those could be legitimate issues that are costing you situations, the variable of another person is too high and you cannot remove another human being from the equation. You have to hold that. Just like you have to hold the fact that there's no easy mode on Elden Ring. You have to hold that whenever you are engaging with a human being, you cannot predict them. I think there's an actual term for that, where algorithmically you can actually predict like the movement and behavior of a crowd, but predicting the behavior of a single individual is impossible. So what I'm teaching you is what works against a crowd, but dealing with a human being, an individual, there's no way you can predict that. That just takes experience, it takes knowledge, it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a certain degree of comfort. But if you keep practicing it, like anything, just like Elden Ring, you will beat that boss, you will beat Melania, and you will beat your opponent. It just takes practice and a good, healthy mindset. If you can nail those two things, you'll be right as rain. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this stream, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today on a wonderful masterclass. I will see you guys next week with part 2 of this. I will have some streams up, so make sure you guys follow me on Twitter at Weiss_training, because I will be posting a stream schedule tomorrow. I will be streaming quite a bit this week. I am going out of town next Wednesday until the Wednesday after, from the 11th to the 18th. So if you guys are, attending streams, I will do streams until that point, but then there's going to be a period of no streams. If you guys want, please donate. It would really help me making up for the lost income of going to see my parents, but I really miss them, so I want to see them and I need some family time. And I will make it up to you guys. I will be doing some stuff on like voice calls and whatnot, so make sure you get into the masterclass. Make sure you guys get into the Discord by subscribing, so that way we can go ahead, get this place popping again and have a lot of fun. And make sure to check out the end of the week streams, which will be casual. It will be me and Star. Sometimes will be me or Star, and we will be doing stuff like games that we like, where we'll be talking, just hanging out with you guys, or you guys can come ask us questions and hang out with us. Would probably record some podcasts. There will be some YouTube stuff, so keep an eye out for that. And hopefully come join me for an Elden Ring stream, because I'm having a lot of fun with it. But thank you guys so much for joining me, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night, everybody.